What is up, my Yu-Gi Bros? I am your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. Welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I apologize, the camera is still a little wiggity because I'm having to use my computer's camera because the one that I used to film on all the time has died. So I need to get something new to be working with for this channel. In the meantime, my videos are largely going to look like this. Today, I want to have a talk with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community. This is a conversation that I have started before, that I had a video on way back when, actually right before I stopped Yu-Gi-tubing in the first place. That conversation is about Yu-Gi-Oh! Players' attitudes. When I talked about this subject before, it was mostly about the competitive community versus the casual community, and we have this kind of rift that makes the community as a whole become really, really divisive, and it makes it really unhealthy, really toxic. But the things I want to talk about today are things that are a problem throughout the entire community and are true of casual players and competitive players alike. And basically the issue is that we tend to have a bad attitude as a community. It actually is fairly notorious in a couple of ways. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a pretty big reputation for having a lot of thieves. That's why a lot of card shops are very, very cautious about allowing Yu-Gi-Oh! Players to hang out there because there's a massive tendency for Yu-Gi-Oh! Players to steal cards. But it's more than that. It's really about Yu-Gi-Oh! Players having trouble with three really important pieces of attitude. One of them is internal, one of them is external, and one of them is kind of a philosophy. And the problem is that almost all Yu-Gi-Oh! Players in the game right now have an issue with one of these pieces of attitude, and way too many people in the community have an issue with all of them. Each of these are sort of interwoven, so I could do this discussion in any order I really felt like, but I'm going to start with the internal one. The internal issue that Yu-Gi-Oh! Players have when it comes to attitude is that people are way too tight. We're not easygoing. You have to be easygoing in order to play any game like this, especially one where probabilities come into play and where sometimes the probabilities work against your favor. If players aren't easygoing, they're not enjoying the game to its fullest. In fact, oftentimes, people who aren't easygoing, people who call themselves casual players, who say that they play the game for fun, don't end up enjoying the game at all. When you're not easygoing, you get angry at the littlest things. You get angry at a card in your hand for not being the card that you want. You get angry at your entire deck for not playing exactly the way you want to play it. You get angry at the other players for playing decks that you don't like. You end up getting angry at the game, and then people get angry at you. And it's generally just really unpleasant. I don't know why you bother doing it. I understand that it is really tough because sometimes really, really nasty things and things that, you know, I wouldn't wish on anybody in terms of luck, in terms of the way that games go. Sometimes things that suck happen in this game. But if you can't be easygoing about those things, you are creating a toxic environment for yourself, and you're creating a toxic environment for your others. The example that a lot of people throw around is like people who like throw their cards all over the place when they lose, people who like won't shake their opponent's hand or something like that. But that's a really extreme example, and the biggest part of the problem is that it is a small thing. Each of these attitude adjustments is a very small thing, one thing at a time. One card at a time that wasn't the one that you wanted it to be. One game at a time that went in a way that you didn't want it to go. These are small things that cause people to be irritable, and that cause them to be irritated and just create a toxic environment in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And there are so many players who just get so angry at the game. And I know, it's easy to get angry at the game. There are a lot of times when I'd like to be angry, but you can't do that. You can't be existentially angry at this game and continue to play it. You might as well just not play it and not complain about it to other players. This is the other thing. A lot of players will take a break, and I totally understand that. Sometimes this game sucks. There are formats that are just not enjoyable for some players, and if you do, that's fine. But don't rag on it to the other players. Don't get angry at the game to the other players, because that's just bringing the toxicity that's inside you to the other players. If you're complaining about how the game isn't worth playing anymore, about how it's skillless, about how it is just like totally uncreative, about how people are net decking all the time and that's all, then you are telling the other players that since they're still playing the game, they are participating in an environment that is skillless, they are participating. You're basically telling them that they are degenerate to the community, even though you're the one who had decided to take a break. Or sometimes people do this and they don't even bother quitting the game. They hang around, and they hang around at locals, and they're just unpleasant for no reason. And so this is a really big internal thing. If you are not easygoing with this game, if you can't look at the outcome of a duel and think, that's just the way this goes. If you can't look at your record in a day and say, maybe I can do better next time, that kind of sucked. If you can't, if when things go poorly for you, you get really uptight about it, or even when things haven't gone poorly yet, but you think they might when you're in a really tense situation, and you get really irritable, if you can't be easygoing about that, then that makes it hard for everybody in the game. And like I said, this isn't easy, but it's something that we as a community have to do in order to improve the game, and in order to improve ourselves, and in order to improve the community, so people enjoy playing this game more, and maybe more people will play, and maybe more people will enjoy playing it. Maybe you'll make more friends, but that's the really big internal one. This is especially important for casual players, because casual players, let's face it, are going to get steamrolled a lot, especially when you just start out. There is a way to get beyond the whole constantly getting wrecked at locals thing if you're a casual player, but it requires something that a lot of casual players are not willing to put in the work to do, and I am going to put that at the end of this video because it involves the most important attitude adjustment that I can talk about. But it's really important for casual players because, especially at first, you're just going to lose a lot. And if you can't be easygoing about it, if you're constantly getting angry at the game, if you could, every time your luck doesn't go well, you get really irritated, then you shouldn't be playing the game, because as a casual player, you're usually playing it for fun. You're playing it to enjoy yourself, to not take it seriously. And if you're getting irritable about it, if you're getting angry at it, if you're starting to rub that off on the other players, then you're not enjoying the game, and you're making other people not enjoy the game. And here's something that I can't stress enough. Most of the people watching this video are going to think, these things don't apply to me. This is not a problem that I have. And the one big thing that you can tell, and I'm going to say this again at the end because it involves one of the last attitude adjustments, the one way that you can tell that you're really doing well with these things, with these bits of attitude, is if you watch a video like this, where somebody's talking to the community, trying to have a heart-to-heart, and saying that there needs to be an attitude adjustment, and you say, you know what? I should think about that. I should keep that in mind. I should know I should notice when I'm causing one of these problems, or when I'm having an issue with this kind of attitude, because nobody's perfect, and you're always going to have some issues all the time, but it's really a sign of a good player and a person who is easygoing and has all of these things lined up, that they are willing to sit and watch a reminder that they need to look at that and think, you know what? I'm glad I had that reminder. So if you're one of those people watching this video right now and thinking none of these things are going to apply to me, check yourself. Seriously, check yourself. Think about what you have experienced in this game. Be really questioning, be sincerely questioning of your own attitude in the game. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there before I move on. So the second one, this is the external one. This is particularly important for competitive players, but like I said, it is important for everyone. And this is the issue of sportsmanship. I think that we have a major sportsmanship issue in our game. And that comes down to a lot of things that people wouldn't think of as being sportsmanship issues. Sportsmanship is really treating other players like you respect them as players. You don't have to think that they're especially good to respect them as players, but you also shouldn't voice that. You shouldn't tell people that they're bad. You shouldn't you shouldn't be derisive toward them. You shouldn't be derogatory toward them. They don't deserve that. That doesn't help the community. You're just being an asshole. And so sportsmanship is really about respect. And that means that when you are playing against an opponent, you always shake their hand at the end. You always give them the respect that you would give to the best player in the game, the best player who you like the best, the person who you would most want to play against to enjoy the game. You treat every player like that, because that's what sportsmanship is, because it's easy to be happy, to be respectful to the players that you have an inherent admiration for, or that you really enjoy playing. But I know that it is really, really hard, and this is the important thing, to be able to shake the hand of the player who just 2-0'd you with a degenerate deck, to feel happy for a person who beat you when they top. And, of course, to acknowledge when you win and not make it a big deal about them, not make it about them being a bad player. And, it's one thing if you're going to be talking about it with your friends. If that's the kind of dynamic you have with your friends where you rag on other players, that's not a kind of community that I want to be a part of. That's not a kind of group that I would want to be a part of, but that's one thing. But when you're, voicing it out loud, when you are standing among the tables and being like, man, I just played against this utter scrub. He was terrible at the game. I don't even, it was an easy win. So, things like that. That's poor sportsmanship, and that's not good for the community because people overhear that. And people think about this game and they hear that people are just ragging on players that they think are bad, ragging on players that lose, and when people hear that, they start to just feel badly about the game. And here's another thing. Players are going to be like, we shouldn't coddle people. People, when players are bad, they should know that they're bad. If we're trying to change our attitude to make people enjoy the game more, then we are just coddling the bad players. But that's not what this is about. This is not about telling a player who's bad that they're good. And this is the other thing, you don't make that value judgment about players. You can make judgments about things that they've done. You can say, you know what, this is not what I would have done. In fact, you could say, this is not what you should do. You are perfectly free to have your opinion, but it's really about thinking about when you are saying something, are you treating that player as an equal human being? Are you treating them as an equal player? Are you treating them with the respect of an opponent? Somebody that you are going to be playing against who is maybe not on an equal skill level to you, but who is equal as a person and deserves the same respect as a player. That's what sportsmanship is about. And that also includes things like when a kid comes into the room and people talking about ripping off the kid and people talk about, how we're going to 2-0 this kid and or this kid doesn't stand a chance, whatever. When players are dismissive of new players, when players are making fun of people who don't have experience with this game, that's a massive sportsmanship issue. And so if you are going to adjust your attitude in terms of sportsmanship, what it really takes is understanding, even when I'm unhappy with the outcome of the game, my opponent deserves respect. Unless you have a really, really good reason to, want that player to do poorly. It's not even about the deck they're playing. If they're playing a deck that you consider degenerate, it's one thing if you're thinking about, I don't want players to think that this is a deck that you can run at regionals, and I don't want to see it around a lot, so it would be nice if that person didn't top. But if it's about the player, if you're just I don't like this person because they lost, and you're feeling badly about them, and you're treating them badly, if you are even being, irritable and grumpy toward them, I use the word irritable a lot during this video, then you are having issues with sportsmanship. And so if you just take a moment to think about yourself and your relationship with the concept of sportsmanship, I think that it's a really important thing. And this all comes down to the final point, the final philosophy, the most important one out of all of these, which is self-responsibility, taking responsibility for yourself. This can beget all of the other attitude changes that people need, and it's one of the biggest ones in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's this article that's been running around on Facebook for a while. I think John Moore, I think that's his name, of House of Champs, passed it on to us this weekend about American players versus Japanese players playing Street Fighter. And the person who is being interviewed was saying that the reason why American players can't win is because they don't take responsibility for themselves. And I think the same problem is true of Yu-Gi-Oh! Players do not take responsibility for themselves. When they lose a game, they blame it on anything other than themselves. They don't take the responsibility for making themselves a better player. And that's what self-responsibility is about. When something happens in the game, it's about you. It's about what you've done. And sometimes, yes, sometimes I don't like using the phrase luck, but sometimes when you're thinking about your attitude toward the game, luck does come into play. Sometimes you could have played perfectly, and the luck would have had it that you would have lost the game. But it's also important to note, it is really, really important to make sure that when you do think that you lost from luck, to make sure that you didn't lose because you were outplayed. Sometimes that looks like luck, and you have to understand, did your opponent just build the better deck? Sometimes that's true when you think that it's about luck. And so you have to really scrutinize yourself each time you lose and each time you win. What happened in that game? Where was the turning point? Was my deck better than my opponent? Was my opponent's deck better than mine? What were the things that made the anatomy of that duel? And you have to really examine yourself from the inside. Did I play that perfectly? Of course, you're never going to play it perfectly. I mean, there's sometimes when you're going to play it really, really well, but you're not going to be a perfect player. There are going to be games where you don't play perfectly, and it's really important to take responsibility for that. Because the most important thing in enjoying the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is improving yourself as a player. Because if you get better at the game, if you get really good at the game, you can play casually all you want. Take Nick Gibson, my friend, for a moment. Nick Gibson is a frickin' phenomenal player. He spent so much time building his skill, and he had so much thought directed toward his own skill as a player and becoming better, that there came a point at which he was skillful enough that he could play casually, that he could play creative decks, and he would win. He would do well. He wouldn't get steamrolled at locals. He would, in fact, get first place undefeated frequently. Nick is a really, really good player, and he also played casually really well. So even if you're a casual player, that doesn't put you off the hook for becoming a better player. And so I think that that is the major thing, self-responsibility, taking responsibility for yourself. When your opponent, when another player is having problems with their own attitude, you don't have responsibility over them. You don't have responsibility over what they do, how they react to a game, how they act. What you do have responsibility over is what you do and how you react to it. And it's really important that you recognize that you recognize that you have responsibility over your own attitude and over yourself. And so I'm sorry if I've sounded really angry during this video or something like that. This is just a really important subject to me. I want to really hammer it into players that this is a game that is really dependent on our attitude toward it, because it is a social game, and it is a game that we play for enjoyment. And it's also a competitive game, which means that it's only fun if players have good sportsmanship, if players have some sort of respect between the two of them. And so I'm going to be talking a lot in the future about improving your skill as a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player and examining yourself as a player, because I think that that is the most important thing, the most important characteristic you could have as a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player. And when you combine that with good sportsmanship, when you combine that with having a good easygoing attitude toward the game, you're going to have a great time, and people are going to love you. People are really going to enjoy you as a player. But it all comes down to your own control over your own attitude, and it's tough. It's really hard. I totally understand. I have issues with my attitude. Even when I'm really thinking about it, I have to do a lot of work to recognize that the player who beat me with Demise outplayed me. They had a better deck than mine, or they played that duel successfully, and that they deserve my respect as a player, even though I think that the strategy is really degenerate. This is funny to me because I was just playing with a guy. I've been testing with a dude who I have a lot of respect for as a guy, having not even known him for very long, and he plays Demise. And so this is just a wake-up call that I wanted to give to the community. I wanted to spark this discussion. I want to hear other players talking about it. I want this to be spread throughout the community. I know that Alex Simo, who I've been talking to about attitude over the weekend, because he has the coolest easygoing attitude when it comes to this game. And he agrees with me that there needs to be a lot more introspection. So I want to start this discussion. I am so sorry that my videos have all been like 20 minutes long for the past few weeks. These are just topics that I want to get out of the way, that I want to have in their fulfillment, in their fullest. In a particular video. I don't want to split this up. And so I promise I will have shorter videos in the future. These are just really big topics that I've been covering. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I am done with this rant. I am your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. And, of course, subscribe for more decks, discussion, analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Thank you all for watching. I got a jet.